Good morning, everyone. Here from, I'd like to say sunny Finland, but it's still, it's not even dawn yet, it's just up here in the far north, we do have extreme shortening of the days. And I imagine if we went up to Spitzenberg, Norway, it's sort of an island, big island, around 80 something north, where 90 is as far as you can go. It's just pretty well going to be dark all the time. But the inner light may shine, and that's what we hope for as we turn that light upon the interior problems which are largely originating, I always say, through mistaken identity, thinking that one is the personality, that one is the lower self, thinking that, and that's a big mistake, and all these glamours circulate around that misperception, and they are aided and abetted by the counterforce that doesn't want to see humanity ever becoming a spiritual kingdom. Of course, it's hopeless on their part, but the delaying possibility is always there, So let's just, gosh, I've got so many things going on here. Let's get together here for a few moments and come together wherever we may be. Geographically, it doesn't make any difference. Just imagine there's no time. Well, we're all meeting at the same time, certainly, but no time, and there's certainly no space in this particular visualization. And it is as if we are one unit of consciousness, and the presence of each of us augments the sensitivity in consciousness of each of us. Excuse me. And we imagine that we are standing on the periphery of the ashram, and we are united in purpose and ready to carry out this clarification. The attitude of the observer and the second seed group, and the sometimes known as observers of reality, which is not necessarily customary. We seem to be easily observing non-reality. It has the same, the same chakras as the religious seed group, the head, the heart, and is it, well, since I'm solar plexus, I think, but since I'm forgetting, I'll go here to Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, and I'll go to about page 38, and here it is, the trained observers, and they have this Buddhic connection where They're going to help break up the existing glamours. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't hurt to read this, because in a way we're working with this group. Another group is that of the trained observers. Their objective is to see clearly through all events, through space and time, by means of the cultivation and use of the intuition. They work largely on the astral plane at the dissipation of glamour, and thus bringing in illumination to mankind. Another type of energy is brought into play, producing another type of interrelation and communication. This communication is between the plane, which is the plane of illumination and pure reason, the Buddhic plane, and the plane of illusion and glamour, which is the astral plane. The trained observers are asked to remember that their great task is to dispel the world illusion through the pouring in of light. When there are sufficient numbers of groups, notice the plural there, and I know of several such groups, actually, and probably you do too, working along these lines, there will be found upon the physical plane certain channels of communication which will act as mediators between the world of light and the world of illusion. You may remember how sometimes in this meditation we hold one hand up, as it were, and another hand down, and we are the bridge between the world of light, in this case the intuitive realm, and the world of kama-manasic emotional illusion. They will be transmitters of that form of energy which will break up existing glamours and illusions, and so dissipate the ancient, deceptive thought forms. So notice thoughts are also involved here, right? They will release the light and peace which will illumine the astral plane and dispel the illusory nature of its life. So basically, by the time we reach the second initiation, a lot of this work has been done. And notice the words light and peace. When you think about the planets that are available to take the second initiation, we're thinking particularly of Venus, the lighted one, and Jupiter, the great second ray planet, and Neptune, the light of pure reason, the light of the intuition. So this gives a good example of what we're trying to do here together, these several years. And let's see if I can, and here it is, the head, heart, and the solar plexus center. And notice that in the New World Religion group, it's the same. And boy, that's an area where glamour is very deep, and it needs a lot of work. And of course the politics as well, not looking at the whole thing, but just looking at one's own partisan advantage. Now, I just want to welcome you and thank you for coming. Some of you at an inconvenient hour, I realize. So Alexandra, hi, and Annette, and Antoinette, and Barbara, and Catherine, and Gretchen, Karen, Kim, Leslie, and Mariana, and Martha, Michael, and Michael Moultram, I guess, and Michael Starcrow. Hi, good to see you here. Natney, Risto, Suzanne, Tia, Vera, Zenaidi, and Veronica. And over here on the management side, we have Joe, and Tuya and I are over there as well. Just to say, that a few years ago, Tuya, Olivia, and I said, well, let's add our voice to one and be one more of these groups that is working with glamour particularly. And it's, I found out the hard way myself that this is dangerous work. And the protective formula is very, very necessary. It's the greatest of the planes of illusion at this time, looking at illusion in a general way. So we proceed somewhat self-sacrificially here, and watch out that we do not succumb to the very thing that we are trying to help eradicate from the consciousness of humanity. All right. Now, let's see where we are here. Yeah, this is number 135, and it's more or less page 128, I think, and it's reading number 75. So let's see what is the segue here. It's talking about the disciple and how long a span it is, and indeed, the Christ himself is the disciple. Our planetary logos is the disciple. There's naught but the hierarchy. He wants us to cultivate this consciousness within the consciousness of some being in whom we live and move and have our being, and that is we call it the hyparxis of any particular hierarchy. The earth itself is a hierarchy, and the planetary logos is our hyparxis. The solar system is a hierarchy, and the solar logos is the hyparxis. It's like a mountain range, with mountains rising ever above and beyond the others until you reach the very, of course, it's the interior point, the very top, the very highest point of being within our universe, finally. Okay. Right. He says, substance is the key. I say substance and not form, for it is in reality substance which controls spirit for a very long time. Cycle of expression. Matter of fact, if you look at let's just say, to make a human being until that human being really becomes a full member of the kingdom of souls, we may be going, 25 million years. And the greatest amount of time is spent on personality development. The vehicles and personality, a considerably smaller period on the development of soul contact, and a much, much smaller period as we try to contact that which is being, isness, our essence, the pure being that we are. So, it is not matter that controls, for the reason that gross matter is always controlled by the forces. Now, when we say substance, we do mean energy force, really. That which substands the appearance of matter. But in another way, there is matter on every plane, and there is that which is substantial to the matter on every plane, and that matter itself may be substantial to something still more gross, still more dense. So, in a way, it's gross matter is always controlled by the forces which are esoterically regarded as etheric in nature, and therefore as substance and not form. So remember this at all times, for it holds the clue to the true understanding of the lower nature. You see, if we were to look at this map, the higher four subplanes of each of these planes, with maybe the mental plane in question, but the higher four of each are the substantiality of any subplane in the cosmic physical plane. See, all these seven, physical, kamic, monastic, Buddhic, atmic, monadic, logoic, they are all cosmic physical subplanes. And the substantiality, particularly, focuses on the higher four, which are substantial to the more material lower three. As I say, only the mental plane may be in doubt because of the very interesting and maybe somewhat ambiguous position taken by the fourth subplane on the mental plane. Anyway, you know, we are workers down here in this area, and what we're trying to clarify for the sake of humanity in general, and to save countless millennia of suffering, is the kamic plane, the astral plane, and especially in that union, an involuntary union of mind, lower mind, and desire. We have to learn how to separate these from each other, and maybe not so many people can do that. We have to learn how to do that. Okay, now going on. Let's have a little reading this morning, and I just want to say that I have put in the chat box a little notice about what is the link for later on tonight when we continue with our cosmic fire adventure. You know, that's enough to keep you going for the rest of the century. It's just an amazing, amazing book, requiring a lot of patience, and slowly the initiate consciousness develops out of that book, and nor can it really be understood unless the initiate consciousness is somewhat present. So, you know, we do what we can, and we learn along the way. So that's here in the chat box, and you can see that. You can pull it out, and as BL said the other night, just go to Makara, www.makara.us, and a lot of new things have come there, being transferred over from Yahoo, and I think a lot easier now to reach, thanks to our team, BL, Joe, and Michael and Frederick has helped us tremendously, and Vic. And, you know, we've got a whole team here trying to bring you the ageless wisdom in as comprehensive and as assimilable a form as may be possible. Okay, now, let's see what's up for today. We will study, therefore, the basic, let's see, let me get one of these. I always like to have a bracket in case I have to write something. And I don't always have to write something, but in case I do, it's nice to have a bracket, you know. Okay, that ought to do it. We will study, therefore, the basic essential contrasts which the disciple must intuitively grasp. Notice, our intuition is being stimulated, and in this work of the second seed group, it turns out that the intuition is very important, just as it is when we're dealing with the seed group for the New World Religion or for psychology, etc. Which the disciple must intuitively grasp and with which he must familiarize himself. We will divide what we have to say into 4 parts, dealing briefly, but I trust helpfully, with each. Okay, so we oftentimes learn by contrast, and the Tibetan is giving us opposites, so we learn. Sometimes when I say to somebody, okay, you want to learn astrology, you want to learn about the signs and their meaning, then always study 2 together. When you're studying Sagittarius, study Gemini. When you're studying Gemini, study Sagittarius. And the very opposites there will throw into a clearer light the meaning of the processes in the sign opposing the one you are studying. I found this to be the case, and I recommend it. Okay, so the contrast between illusion and its opposite, the intuition. Now remember, when we're working to, the word is dispel, when we're working to dispel the illusions of the mental plane, it's the intuition which dispels. Okay, now each one is a little different, and we have to get a feeling for them and learn how to operate with them. A little water here might be able to go a long way. Okay, the contrast between glamour and its opposites, illumination. Now, illumination is interesting. Sometimes it refers to the mental plane. Sometimes it just refers to light in general from all kinds of higher planes, and sometimes specifically for the intuition. But he warns us, don't bring in too much soul energy into the glamour, the battle with glamour, as you might make it worse. Sometimes just bring in the 5th ray light at the center of the forehead, and that will be sufficient to deal with the glamour. So the D word that we're dealing with is dissipation. And how about dissipation through mentality? And especially Ray 5 is very helpful here. Whereas Ray 4 correlating with the Buddhic plane is certainly helpful in the dispelling of illusion. Now, the contrast between Maya and its opposites, inspiration. Now, remember what he calls Maya by a kind of a humorous, well, maybe humorous, unthinking, emotional, you may remember, emotional mess. This is what he calls Maya. And what is involved here is the dispersion of Maya. And it's obvious that inspiration has order in it. So we are avoiding this chaos of Maya, running here, running there, rush not from point to point. It's associated with the third ray, and of course the third ray does finally overcome it entirely. But in the beginning, rush not from point to point, nor be deceived by the outer things and that which passes away. So a lot of us still have our etheric body in quite a quandary and quite a state of disorganization. And we have to learn how to organize our approach to the etheric physical plane. And then this, maybe, which is a little harder to understand and that we're going to try to understand, the contrast between the dweller on the threshold and its opposite, the angel of the presence. I sometimes think that angel of the presence is a projection of the solar angel into the higher mental plane matter of the causal body, but also a kind of mixing of the presence of the monad along with the presence of the solar angel. Because after all, we need this angel of the presence to introduce us to the monad, and the monad is the presence. Now, I think I'm not sure what kind of D word, maybe decentralization is appropriate here. Okay, so we'll study this because some very interesting things come up which seem to suggest that there's a fifth initiation process that involves the dweller, the angel, and the presence, all of them. And you would think that maybe we would be done with all of this by the time the fourth initiation takes place, but apparently not. All right, so these contrasts, take a look at them. This is what we will deal with. And we assume that we can do some antikarana work and that intuition, illumination, inspiration are to a certain extent accessible by us. And it's all right here, and the quality of our consciousness is accordingly improved. All right. This, you will realize, I guess we do, don't we, is a large subject and deals with the major problem of the disciple. In other words, embodied in our inability to see the opposite of the trap in which we are functioning. That's a big problem for us, you know. We're in illusion, but we don't access intuition. We're in glamour, but we don't access illumination. We're in that unthinking emotional mess called Maya, and yet we do not access inspiration. And we are identified as the personality, which is a big problem with so many people, and yet we fail to decentralize ourselves from the personality and truly identify with what is more interior, more fundamental, namely the angel of the presence. So now basically what he does is he takes this item by item. Let's see, maybe we can finish one item. Let's see. And maybe more, I don't know yet. We'll see. So first, the contrast between illusion and intuition. Let's just think, you know, that your thoughts, my thoughts, to the extent that they are habitual and have adopted the current patterns that humanity has generated, are largely illusory thoughts. Okay. I have chosen this as the first contrast with which to deal, as it should, even though it probably may not, constitute the major glamour of the members of this group. He's saying, look, you know, you people should be mentally focused, and many of you are not. Now, mental polarization, as I've often said, is another matter. Mental polarization requires still more work, and it occurs after we have taken the second initiation and gone off into what for us is the desert of loneliness, and have confronted the world, the flesh, and the devil. So there we have maybe mental polarization. But even before that, a true and real mental focus, this is what we should have. It should constitute for us the major glamour, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't. Unfortunately, the emotional glamour dominates still, and for the majority of you, the second contrast between glamour and illumination may prove most useful and most constructive. So we are not yet where Master DK would have us focus, and that is mentally and invoking the intuition. So that's interesting right there. He's just saying, you know, the degree of your mental focus, which could access the intuition and bring it to bear, to be rid of illusion, we're not there yet. Now, I've adopted the attitude that if he says it of his group of some 50 people, he might as well be saying it to us, who are the students of the present age. I don't think we're so very different. I think we're quite a bit like those people were. And just think what Master DK undertook to train these people. He found himself before long, even though he said he wouldn't deal with it, he found himself right in the problems of their personality. Well, okay, he did what he had to do. Illusion. Now, this is a good definition and one that we should bear in mind and maybe memorize or keep in the back of our minds. Illusion is the power of some mental thought form, of some ideal, of some concept. Notice that idealism has apparently a mental component. It is the power of some mental thought form, of some ideal, of some concept, sensed, grasped, and interpreted in mental form to dominate the mental processes of the individual or of the race, and consequently to produce the limitation of the individual or group expression. Now, what I'm going to do, this is an important one, and I'm just going to, make it a little bigger and call it to our attention. So let me just think about this as I repeat it for us. Illusion is the power of some mental thought form, of some ideal, of some concept, sensed, grasped, and interpreted in mental form to dominate, that's the word, to dominate the mental processes. It's as if we can't help ourselves in how we think until we can break out of this form of illusion. So it dominates the mental processes of the individual or of the race, and consequently to produce limitation, the limitation of the individual or group expression. I've often thought that when dealing with the lower mind, you're dealing with 3 planets particularly. Not so much Venus. That's more higher mind. You're dealing with Saturn, giving us concretion. You're dealing with Mars, which always is ruling some aspect of the cleaving lower mind. And don't forget the cleaving potentials of Saturn carrying its scythe. Illusion is based on chopping everything up and not seeing how it relates. And then, of course, a lower function of Mercury. So, Saturn and Mars and Mercury. Such ideas and concepts that tend to dominate can be of 3 kinds, and as I realize, you should know. I guess he's always reminding us of how we've fallen a little bit short of what we should actually understand and the origin of the things we should understand. Okay, ideas and concepts, and that's what we're looking at right now. I'll just make that a little different color, and that's it. Okay. They can be inherited ideas, as is the case of those who find it so difficult to adjust themselves to the new vision of world, life, and of social order, as expressed in the newer ideologies. They are powerfully conditioned, these people, by their caste very rigid in India, maybe not so much anymore, but still having its effect, conditioned by their caste, their tradition, and their background. So these things, traditional ideas, are sort of set in concrete and make it very difficult to have a flexible mind. Now, the combination of the sixth ray and the fifth ray produces idée fixe. Well, there's some accents there I should be putting in, but let's just call it idée fixe, and rigidifies the content of the lower mind. A lot of sixth ray people today are right in there. They don't believe in the ongoing development of the mind and of their ideals and of the religion to which they adhere, and they freeze in their interpretation of their Bible, whatever that Bible may be. And it's a real problem because it's so limited. And there's a tendency to want it to occur and to interpret everything literally instead of symbolically. Now look, when you start interpreting things symbolically, you're on your way to a higher aspect of mind. You're on your way to the abstract mind. But the literalism of interpretation of the concrete mind, the so-called, as I've pointed out before, inerrancy of our particular Bible, word for word, just the way God spoke it. Okay, it's childish. It doesn't make sense. The Christ said certain things, and maybe quite a few of them are recorded the way he said them, but they still had to be translated from original languages. And so even there, we may have variation rather than inerrancy, the impossibility of a word not being correct or erroneous. And inside certain families, there are inherited ideas and traditions as well. And I'm going to put that down. So meanwhile, just think. What have you absorbed from your culture, your family of origin, your particular placement in the social milieu? What was part of your rigid conditioning, if any, that you have not been able to shake? I think, if I look back upon my family of origin, I think some kind of pretty deep distrust of others was inculcated. You have to take advantage of others before they take advantage of you. Those subtle things which prevent right human relations. I'm looking back and I'm trying to see, did I ever shake it? And people joke and they say, well, do unto others before they do unto you. That kind of distortion of the golden rule. I guess all of us have certain things we grew up with, maybe in the church or synagogue or mosque or whatever. If we attended any of those things, ideas were inculcated which were just part of the natural atmosphere that we were breathing in. And we may not have even noticed that they've become a part of our responsiveness to other people and to society. So see if you can, find those in your own nature. And of course, think of it in the labors of Hercules in Gemini. Gemini is always looking for a teacher or being a teacher. So Bucyrus, the false teacher, is basically chaining Hercules to the altar and saying, only if you listen to me and do exactly as I say and learn from me, my whole set of thought forms, will you be free? Or will you be able to cultivate your next spiritual step? It's obviously a lie. It's a lie. But maybe we've all met Bucyrus in one form or another along the way. Maybe this has happened. Okay, well, anyway, I'm going to go over a few of these things, and you can think about them in relation to your own life. Because when these kinds of things get laid upon you, and you are, well, what do they say about the mind? It makes a good servant, but a poor master. When you are the victim of the mind, it does become the slayer of the real. Like there's just, we're talking about certain perceptions of the presence, like the Jesuits used to do. They would practice the presence of God. Well, if you work only through the mind, you're not going to reach the presence. And the old story is Moses, symbolized as the mind, never reached the promised land. And the higher aspects of the spiritual triad go beyond the usual uses of the concrete mind. So something else has to step in there and be part of your consciousness in order to take you further than the mind can take you. Okay. So we're talking about these different ideas which cause limitation. That's what we're discussing, different ideas which result in the limitation of consciousness. Okay. They can be the more modern ideas, which are, in the last analysis, think of it, the reaction of modern thought to world conditions and situations, and to these many other aspirants are very prone, and most naturally so, especially if living in the vortex of force which we call modern Europe. Now, modern Europe is pretty much the 5 of 5. It's the 5th root race, all right, but it's the 5th subrace of the 5th root race. A lot to do with the Ajna center. It's intellectual. It begins to divorce itself from Kama Manas, and there's all these ideas that emerge, and many of them are simply illusory and erroneous. We've been through a warring century in which the powers of separation have been very great. the Japanese, the Germans, the Italians, at their time, all thought of themselves as superior races, dividing themselves from others. Inferior races needed to be dominated, may end enslaved. Now, these are erroneous ideas. I was also reading about all the channeling that was going on in the First World War at the higher echelons of leadership. There were certain mediums, mostly women, who were apparently bringing through far-fetched energies that were really from the astral plane altogether. They were written about and they were dignified, but really they didn't come from Antares. They didn't come from the bull, They didn't come from the constellations, and yet they were misjudged and misinterpreted. That's happening all the time. Okay, so such modern ideas are construed today into major currents and dominating ideologies. So you attach the emotion to your very intense thought, and there you get the dominating ideology. Okay, so intense emotion attached to intense thought. And to these, every intelligent person must inevitably at least react, though they forget that reaction is based on tradition or upon national or international predisposition. Now, what did he say about Germany? The very Germany of World War II, the very susceptible, mediumistic German people with, and you may remember, with Pisces as the personality.
We are currently improving an issue with your audio connection. Please stand by.
Uh-oh. Talking
Your
here.
audio connection is back up and ready to go.
Okay.
Please allow time for your callers to rejoin.
Oh. Is anything wrong? Are we in trouble?
Well, we heard that. Why might we suggest that people raise their hand if they heard the message and are still experiencing audio, so we know how many people are okay? Just raise your hand.
I have not
Thank
seen.
you. I see them.
Okay.
Yep, we've got hands raised, so people are still hearing us.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. Sorry, it was a bit of a bolt out of the blue there. Anyway, different groups of people react to thought in different ways. Germany was extremely glamour prone at the time because of the Pisces personality, and probably because of the fifth ray mind, I do believe. So they became very concrete in their glamours and caused, a great deal of havoc as a result. I don't think Italy had that. I don't think Japan had it in quite the same way. What do we learn? That Japan was Maya, Germany was glamour, but with a fifth ray mind, and Italy was illusion. That was the three heads of the Hydra accordingly, or the three heads of the of Cerberus, the dog from the underworld. We always find this kind of monster appearing. He's got three something, and he's representing the threefold personality and the way it goes astray. All right, a little bit more. So modern ideas also are not necessarily sound. This is what he's saying. There's a lot of misinterpretation. Okay, lots of misinterpretation, even though we are dealing with modernity. And so we don't yet have the fertilized, flexible, abstractly impressed, concrete mind. We just have the concrete mind. And as a result, we're off the mark. And it's flourishing today still among so many people that have no idea. They're still working in the hall of ignorance. They may be intelligent in a concrete manner because they may be developing the third petal of the egoic lotus, but they are still in the hall of ignorance, and the higher of the pairs of opposites and the higher mind are not theirs. Now, one more thing. Let's just take a look, because that will give us an idea of the contrast between illusion and intuition. And here are the third type of ideas which are causing limitation. Let's just say causing limitation. They can be the newer, dimly sensed ideas which have in them the power to condition the future and lead the modern generation out of darkness into light. But what happens if the old concrete mind seizes upon them and misinterprets them? And so even though these new ways of thinking want to be constructive in human nature, they cannot get through and are distorted by the concrete mind. Okay, none of you as yet, now I think we're dealing here with the Raincloud of Knowable Things, and even more so later with the Raincloud of Unknowable Things, as is described in esoteric psychology. None of you as yet really sense these new ideas, though in moments of high meditation and spiritual achievement you may vaguely and briefly react to them. So we have to know what our limitations are here, and there are ideas on the borderland of consciousness which are not yet coalesced, effective, applicable, receivable, but they're coming. They're coming. If we don't do too much to misinterpret these things in the beginning and make them a menace rather than a help. That reaction may be real just insofar as it conditions with definiteness your service to your fellow men. You can react correctly, and you can do so increasingly if you persevere, or if you preserve your soul's integrity and are not overcome by the battle and the fever of your surroundings within your chosen field of service. So there's the possibility here. It's promising, but it's not guaranteed. And if they are wrongly received, they cause just as much difficulty. And look at what they're peddling in the esoteric bookstores. You just go along and you look at the books and you see, where do the people get this stuff? They're just making it up, and it's not leading anywhere, and it's just wrong. It's just incorrect. Okay, but it has something to do with possibilities in the future. So anyway, what we've just looked at, just to review, something is dominating the mental process. Certain ideas come forth. And these ideas can be traditional, more modern, or futuristic. Notice how he has divided this. Divided into 3 time segments: the past, the present, and the future, and none of them truly accurate or useful. The last one, not useful yet. A mental illusion might perhaps be described as an idea embodied in an ideal form which permits no room or scope for any other form of ideal, and therefore it precludes an ability to contact ideas in the world of ideas. The man is tied to the world of ideals and of idealism, and he can't move away from it. This mental illusion ties and limits and imprisons the man. A good idea may consequently become an illusion with great facility and prove a disastrous conditioning factor in the life of the man who registers it. So we'll read that again next time, but that gives us an idea. You know, the word idea is so frequently used, and it has a technical meaning on the Buddhic plane and beyond, but it doesn't. It isn't always used that way. It's sometimes used in a more ordinary way. We're on page 130. So I'll just transpose this down and find it, if I can find it. Should be able to find it. Yeah, here we go. So just bear with me, please, and think about what you would like to discuss while I'm making sure that I can become properly oriented next time. I'm not sure how this works. No, I'm not doing too well here. I've just forgotten how to do it. All right, well, that'll have to do for the moment. So this is the end of number 135 and reading number 75, apparently. We start with 136, and we'll meet on the 15th. I guess the full moon is coming in there somewhere, so we'll have to see how that all works. It'll be an evening meeting, and we're on page 130. We actually did 2 pages, so that's very heartening for me. And reading number 76. Okay. All right. Just reviewing. What's it all about? The concrete mind as a limitation, illusion defined as the domination of the mental process by something which inhibits its scope, inhibits flexibility, inhibits adaptability, and is involved with fixation. Now, you know, there are various laws of the solar system, and when we get to the 5th ray, the law is the law of fixation. And then, of course, the rigidity of the 6th ray passing out. When a person is afflicted by that combination, they really can't get out of their illusions too easily. It's a problem. Okay. So, friends, maybe I've gone a little longer again than I intended to, but let's see where we are. I see question marks, so let's get in there and take a look. Okay, Studio Fine. Oh, my goodness, is Mercury retrograde? Oh, so that's what's going on, huh? Well, I guess we'll have to appreciate the retrogradation of Mercury. It gives us a chance to go back over things and get them right, even though it's a nuisance. I have a friend, he made his living repairing machines. Okay, we're getting there. And he said, if Mercury retrograde didn't come along, I wouldn't be making a living, So there it is indeed. And look, on top of that, we're at 27 degrees of Pisces in the moon. So those last few degrees of Pisces are difficult and sometimes a little diffuse, even though the last decade, interestingly enough, is ruled by Mars. All right. So Mercury retro. Thanks, Leslie. And Tuya lost the connection, but I assume she's back. Oops, she's not. Oh, wait a second. Oh, now we can bring her over here. Sorry. Okay, and Vera, I'm going to get to you in just a second. The Maya was in the chaos of the way the Japanese moved and were aggressive. They were driven on the physical plane, animated by these particular thoughts in a very intense manner. We'll have to think of it in a more detailed way. That, of course, it doesn't mean that they didn't have illusions, that they didn't have glamour. They had all that. But DK says, of the three-headed dog, Japan was displaying that unthinking emotional mess called Maya during the war. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that they're going to be displaying that now. But they do have a connection there with the third ray and also the seventh ray via Capricorn, which is their personality sign. Now, there's a problem going on there because DK says every once in a while, nations change their personality ray or their personality sign. And we don't know whether Japan has done this or not, but we do know that the whole ritualistic, the whole traditional kind of thing, the whole idea of doing without thinking. Now, this is what Maya really is. When you have a habit pattern and you just conform to the habit pattern and you don't think anymore, why are you really doing this? I sometimes ask myself, what am I doing and why am I doing it? That's my Maya question. He seems to think that Japan was more afflicted by this than the other two. Maybe Italy was, I don't know, more historical somehow and interpreted the great Roman Empire as being reincarnated in the present fascist movement. But, it was a disorganized effort and it never went very far. Germany was the great danger, the strongest, and the major attack of the Black Lodge was through Germany, given the emotional polarization of most people and the fact that the Germans were ruled by Pisces, which is so connected with the glamorous tendencies. I realize, now that you cannot see the questions I'm talking about, so I better read them out loud. People are putting in their questions or their statements, and okay, but they don't see it when I pull it up on the main screen. Okay, Suzanne, you spoke of the desert of loneliness after the second. Well, it's taken from after the second initiation. Can you elaborate on that, please? Thank you. It was a reenactment for Master Jesus, who had already been Joshua the high priest, and he had already taken the third initiation, even before he was born. And as far as the Christ was concerned, he was working on the sixth initiation. But Christ Jesus, after the enactment of the baptism with John the Baptist, headed off into the desert, which is a symbol of being alone with one's personality, nature, and one's higher motivations, and seeing what wins. And the devil, you see, I do believe that at this point, both of them, Jesus and the Christ, had long ago, Christ longer ago, rejected the world, the flesh, and the devil, because Jesus was already a third-degree initiate, and the Christ was way beyond that. But all of this was for the benefit of humanity, a reenactment. And who knows, I have a feeling that the Christ was the one that spoke to the devil in three forms. What is the devil? It's the unregenerate mind, emotions, and etheric physical nature. That is the devil. So, he said a couple of things, three things. I always forget one, but, he says, man does not live by bread alone. I think that was the flesh part. And thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. I think that was the illusion part. And he said something about the world. The world, the flesh, and the devil came to him in three ways, and each having its own way, and he rejected them. And he gave not a wordy disquisition, but he gave a straight sentence. Somewhere Alice Bailey has all of that written down. I'm always forgetting one. It may be the world, I'm not sure. Power over nations. Thanks, that's good. Thank you, Michael, appreciate that. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so, but the Christ wanted none of that. He wanted, he was told also in the third temptation, throw yourself down from a high place. Most would die, you will not die, and everybody will worship you. Okay, well, and then he said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And, you're hungry, you've been out here, strike a stone and it will feed you. Man does not live by bread alone. And then what Michael said here, power over nations. None of that, all of that has to be rejected. All of that. Because, you gain in power. And it's a big test after the second initiation to see where you think your power lies. Maybe you're going to deviate off into an entirely individualistic path, which would be the left-hand path. So, no, you can't do that. If you want to be on the Syrian system of initiations, you take the straight and narrow path, rejecting these temptations. Now, it doesn't mean we're going off in the desert. Depends on where you live. The desert is a state of mind, a state of consciousness. And we have to decide, and people get hung up, they get hung up in one or more of these states, and they wake up sadder but wiser, and then maybe in a position to reject the normal temptations. Sometimes people say, they get power, and they say they realize they can do something in the world. They say, basically they're saying, well, the world is open to me now. Why should I worry about doing something lesser or that's right or that's loyal? They give in to the temptation of the world. So you can ask yourself, have I been in this? Have I had this experience? Have I had the experience altogether the way the Christ had? Or is it one at a time? Was it first the world? Was it then the flesh? Was it then the devil? Or have I not met any of this yet? You have to check within yourself. Good. Okay. Now, Vera. Go ahead, Vera.
Mark, you said today that it should not be thrown too much soul light onto glamour or in certain situations. Mm-hmm. And I could sort of vaguely sense that it could produce more resistance from the astral plane or form. And how now, when we do our meditation, dissipation of glamour meditation, and we use very strong words in those mantras, like we kill the life behind the glamour of such and such.
Yeah. That's
it. And so, because I'm more sort of visual, and sometimes I have a sense of the thought form of the glamour we are working with. And sometimes, it's easy, sort of sense of dissipating, and sometimes not. Sometimes it's like, it bounces off the light. And so can you please put more explanation to those things?
I wonder if I can, because sometimes there are very resistant glamours in the world, and we cannot necessarily expect that it will show itself, even symbolically, as yielding to our initial efforts. So we have to keep working with it. And this is also the case with those glamours which assail us individually. It's not like, hey, this is the magical formula, try it once and you're free. It will require the direction of this type of light, particularly the light of Venus at the forehead, may be fed by soul light and some of these other lights of matter. But the main thing is this fifth ray kind of understanding that comes out from the forehead where our weapon is found. So somewhere, I read it a long time ago, but he talks about the way that soul energy can exaggerate the glamour, and that this light from the forehead is much more analytical, and it reveals what the glamour is, takes it apart, and weakens it. So he says, don't just dive in with the enthusiasm of the soul, because the glamours can look very beautiful at first, and you can get an unholy mixture here. Notice that the light that we use has the light of reasoning and logic in it, and that everything is meeting on the plane of lower mind, even though drawing some from above and drawing some from below. So I think we'll come to that, and I can try to look it up. It's been, I don't know, 20 years or more since I have read that, and I'd like to reread it myself. He warns against getting too much soul by itself into the glamour process. He says, this takes care of it. But at the same time, he says, if you just try to use the mind to dispel illusion, it won't work. You need the intuition of the soul and the higher intuition of Buddhi. I guess that's all I can say about it for the moment. But
Michael.
He will say more. Yes. Tuya, is that you?
Yes. Good morning. I just a little short note from the practical point of view of the rehearsal, that this kind of things where when we realize little resistances or bigger resistances, or even some kind of dislike, or that our nature is pulling out from the object. They are wonderful moments to study the inner life, because we are constantly in this huge sea of energies, and to start to be more aware of the Devic lives, from which reasons these so-called resistances are rising. Is that because of our structure of our ray energies, or the astrological moment of the time, the surrounding where we are? Because there can be hundreds of different reasons, but these are like the windows for us to really become white magicians. How to function then? What are those means that we can find the way that how to do something about it? Because the more we become workers and the tools in the hand of God, the more we have to become aware how to really act in particular moments. And I'm just suggesting that, depending of course of the case, but study about what the Om is doing. You were pointing out that we have to be aware of that we cannot put too much soul, but still I have been studying about that when we start to inwardly sound Om, very often it smoothens the way that we can enter in. And of course there are all these techniques which DK has been given, many of them. But for me those moments are very welcoming, because that is how one learns, by working.
Indeed, indeed. So those are good points. And you know, this point that I've been talking about, he made a particular point regarding it. But I don't think, you know, it's something that I would have to try to look up, or maybe Vera, you could find it. It involves the whole idea of glamour and the soul and the mind, and and I can't do that right now. But we do, you know, as we really have to be very sharp about what energy we're drawing upon, as Tuya is suggesting here, and it leads to ability along so many different lines, including the very desirable ability to become in the future a true white magician. Yeah, he basically even makes it sound dangerous sometimes to bring too much soul energy in, because it can, if it's not accompanied by the analytical energy of the forehead and of the fifth ray, then it can lead to trouble. So we have some work here to do as we practice. I think that's what you're saying, Tuya. We have to practice drawing upon the different sources and see how it...
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, because we ought to become also workers, the real workers who know. And how else you are becoming for that point is that you try. And of course we have to always adjust and use our minds, but that is how we learn. If there is some kind of life danger situation, but we all do mistakes. By doing we learn.
Indeed, indeed.
It was very helpful, this distinction between the aiming for the full blast of the soul energy and using it from the forehead in more analytical way. Very, very, very helpful. Thank you for that.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, well, I think we'll find what I'm looking for and what I don't dare continue to look for. You know, it's not just hitting me, but because there is 30 references here, and as interesting as they are, it's the technique of light which particularly is involved in the dissipation of glamour. It is the technique of the presence which is involved in the dispelling of illusion. So we're going to have to really discriminate those two and learn how to use both of them. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Well, there's more to. I certainly have to refresh myself on this subject, and everybody has their own idea, and that's good. And DK will clarify the matter for us as we reach that point, or if somebody wants to do the research with those few words. Maybe there are about 30 references, and we'll find it. You know, within an hour, one should find it. Yeah, thank you, Vera. Again, thank you, Tuya. Okay, now, let's see. And here's Alexandra. And go ahead, Alex.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Asking for your advice on this topic and Tuya's. So first of all, just a statement of the situation and then my question. So for the last 2 months, we've had a group of mainly esoteric volunteers around the world working together to keep their focus on the situation in the UK and the battle of forces going on here, to meditate on it and for it, and in complete awareness that this battle is taking place in a larger context all over the world, and most obviously in the US. And I've said this many times, but this time we are really on the brink. So just a statement of fact, a general election that we didn't want has been called. The problem with the general election now is it mixes up a major political question of who and what policies govern with the question of Brexit. And these ideally should have been decided separately. But because I don't know, God laughs at our plans or has another plan, here we are. So we've sent to the volunteer world group a meditation request to, people have been discussing, what to do about this, which is my question. So the government and legislators have taken this very hot potato of Brexit, which they can't hold anymore, and they've lobbed it into the laps of the people.
Right.
But not in the form we'd hoped, a second referendum. No, they've decided if you want, instead they're asking the people to decide if you want one of these two extremes to rule over you, to form the future of the country over the next 5 years. And the two groups are an extreme hard right group led by the present Prime Minister, or a left group led by the opposition leader, who many see as being way too far left and as would take the country down the road to socialism. Cue gasps of horror from moderate conservatives up and down the country, and especially from the 1% who run everything, and that includes virtually all of the media. So quite like the referendum question of 2016, this doesn't seem to be a logical or a fair question to be posing to the country at this time, but as they say, it is what it is. So on December 12th, which is full moon day, this decision will be made by the people. The problem is that the people need to see through the miasma of glamours, misinformation, wrong information, propaganda. And because our media is controlled by the 1%, and it's mostly hard right. This makes it very difficult for the unthinking masses. Reports to, explain the illegalities of the referendum, they've been suppressed. Reports about interference from other states outside nations in our elections and our politics, these have been suppressed. It goes on and on and on. So, you really have to feel for the state of the people being once again having this forced on them that nobody wanted. And as I said, mixed up with a huge political decision.
Exactly.
So the work now for the masses of people here is to magically and miraculously be able to see through everything, right? And make a decision. And it's all mixed up with other things. So the group, this group of people around the world who've been so dedicated to this situation and believe in this situation and believe in the significance of what happens here for the rest of the world, have been, discussing amongst themselves what is needed now. What do we do now? And because this group of people vary from, probably those who are quite well versed in white magic to those who are light workers and not maybe as esoterically tuned, but have all good intentions and practice meditation, it's hard to suggest a single thing or practice. It's been aimed generally, that we meditate for the increased enlightenment of the mental plane of the British people and the opening of their hearts to stand for true values. And, it's like you're hoping for your children to do the right thing. How do you do that? So, so my first question is, this is where we've left it with the group, which is in your own way, in your own time, to try to focus and shed that light. Whatever you do, meditate, white magic, pray, right? Because as I said, this is a diverse group of people around the world. That's my first question, is what do you think of that? And my second question is, on December 12th, during 2 years full moon broadcast, I wonder if she would consider invoking the soul of the British nation and perhaps
I'm sure,
and perhaps having some sort of vigil, because I think the full moon is like 5 o'clock in the morning, and this is also a very difficult time for people to be voting. It was deliberately chosen. Apparently they're having a NATO meeting here the week before, and Donald Trump is going to be here trying to influence things. It's also dark and cold. People can't get to the polls, and it's also been chosen for a time when young people are going to be traveling. And the young people are the ones who are going to win this thing.
So manipulative. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm sure.
Can I just shortly?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I? Very shortly, because of course, I have been thinking about that. My hair out from my head, because what can one do? Because we have our own thoughts and our own insights about that how things should be evolving, and when we see that they are not evolving to that direction, often I have said and talked with you also that whom of us really know how it should go. Exactly. So we have to always leave that to that possibility of the higher ones and those.
And Tuya, that's why we've said enlighten the minds to know what's right and to do what's right.
Yeah.
We're not saying what's right. We're not saying what's right. Yeah.
Those karmic situations, but just from practical point of view, when we think about different countries, we see that we should start to really go ahead in our little planet towards the union of all countries, what in ever form it is, but to fight for that we are doing that. But when there comes physical laws, we have to go according to the law. But then there is a one wonderful stream of light is about consciousness of people. Even though there will be physical laws which are making borders
Yes.
and separation, still the higher thing above that is the consciousness between people, of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
It will make things much more difficult just for thinking that we can understand that it is a plan of hierarchy to have united Europe. It's the plan of hierarchy to have the united planet. But on the way of that, there comes those decision-making moments, and this that we are so close to the end of the era of the forerunner, and this kind of establishments which will last for years are hurting for us, because if they are not telling for us that we are coming to more together, but still it is about the consciousness. This is still above all of this. And so then to just stand and hold the quality, this is one of the things what we can do. And then to have the concept of the heart radiation, because that is the attractive power. And then to just stand in our own responsibility during these preparation times.
Yes.
These we can do. But how these are now going to manifest is for us alarming. Why on earth we go to these directions? We don't know. Is it correct way to go? Is that what is in the plan? We know that the lower forces, they will come whenever there is any moment in the life of humanity that we are on the edge, choosing the Christ and the kingdom of souls, or do we choose the way of materialistic ways, and then to take like the left-hand path in smaller sense, not I don't mean that really in the very deep sense, but anyway to just choose the old ways. So we are standing on that border, and in the we just read yesterday from the reappearance of the Christ, those things what Christ was teaching us to do and what we can do. And one of those things were the second point of him, that to teach, to seek the kingdom of God, which is within us. So this is one of his messages. We can do it, and we have to seek this kingdom of God within us in the group, and don't give up. If we, do you remember Churchill said, if you go through the hell, keep on going. So that is what we have to do.
All of these very good. And look, I don't know if people, how good they are at working with their creative imagination, but this is the time really when the desirable outcome has to be visualized along with the canceling of the undesirable direction. I'm personally, I'm working with this just about every day in the American situation, and I've seen that some of the things that I've been working on, I don't know how many other people have also been working, are beginning to materialize. So it gives me some degree of confidence that this method of acute focusing on what is desirable may be paying off. And of course, do it together. I mean, if you are having a meeting together in webinaring, I don't know if you are, but should you be having a meeting, do that together if possible. And I'm sure Tuya will be willing when the time comes to bring that in. Okay, well, thank you.
We're not having a webinar. It's all through emails. But I have to say that the unity and integrity of Europe, that you helped formulate that phrase. So that's a good visualization, a good seed thought, and now it's really focusing on the unity and integrity of the United Kingdom, which is looking like
that's good.
Breakup.
That's good. And but I'll tell you what.
Thank you.
See if you can I must say, see if you can get something simultaneous going.
Okay.
See if that's
Simultaneous.
possible. Yes.
Okay.
And see if a little bit of webinaring through Zoom or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Okay. Well, thank you,
Okay.
Alex. Thank you. Now we have to move on.
Thank
By the
you.
way, I have found something. This is not exactly the full thing. It's about a fifth ray method of operating in the technique of integration. But it basically is telling us, and this is what I was suggesting, that if all the emphasis of the soul nature available is poured into the lower nature, the natural man, it might result in the shattering of the form and consequent uselessness of the man in service. If all of it, now see what I mean? We're talking about applying soul energy only in the glamour situation. If all of it, on the other hand, is poured into the receiving chalice of the astral nature, it might only serve to intensify the glamour and to produce fanaticism. Okay? So we have to keep this as the balance. And by the way, this is ruled by Libra, the sign of the balance, okay? And Venus, and keeping a just proportion. So we don't want to go too far, and this is one of those sentences that warns against strictly soul energy into the astral body to combat glamour without the balancing factor of the mind. Okay, and that's for you, Vera. You know, just
Yes.
page 369 in Esoteric Psychology 2, but that's not the only reference. All right, we must go forward, everybody. We must go forward now. And I just want to, let's see here. Let's see, I'm just checking to make sure. I think I've handled everything. Yes, and Kim said, yes. I think it's really important to have the best intentions, but to release attachment. Well, okay, this is the ongoing thing about spiritual development, that attachment usually ends in some sort of difficulty, you know, whether it's attachment to one's children or to an idea, or he really does deal with this when dealing with the laws of the soul in the second volume of Esoteric Psychology. Okay, we're going to, now, is there anything, Michael wrote something further. The full moon chart has some interesting details regarding this, and I can't read any more for some reason, and I don't know why. It just stops there in my, so do you see anything, Joe, or if you're there, do you see anything further? Because I'm having a little difficulty. Michael, what was it that you, let's see, I think I can get you up on, if you're there. Yes, here it is. If you want to, now you are self-muted, if you want to say anything, I lose the words after regarding this comma, and then it goes. So if you want to say anything, this is your moment.
Sure, okay. I wrote something about what this chart shows. It's kind of interesting. The one I have has Aquarius rising. So we've got the sun, the king, let's say, opposing the people. The sun's in the 8th house, opposing the people, the moon in the 2nd house. So Capricorn is the sun sign of the UK, and that whole business in Capricorn is in the 11th house, the same house as the ascendant. You know, we got some Pluto, Saturn in the south. Now the North Node is in the 5th. The ruler of the moon is in the 2nd. The moon and Uranus are both in Taurus, And at the midheaven, we have Venus.
Mm-hmm,
Well, I thought you might
mm-hmm.
know
Well,
about Venus.
okay, well, I would have to look at that, and I appreciate you drawing it to our attention. But whenever Venus is involved and we take the esoteric meaning of it, we have an effective means for dissipating glamour, for activating this particular means of understanding and this weapon, and of casting the whole situation in a better light. So that is something that I'd have to look at, but thanks for drawing it to our attention. The elevated Venus is always good when dealing with the solar angel or dealing with the goal of our planetary logos. So I appreciate your mention of it, and then more detail, of course, would require some directed study. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Okay, now I'm going to get right into the meditation, because we have gone on quite a bit here, and that's fine and that's good. But let's now deal with the formula. Now, the glamour I'm going to deal with today, or we're going to deal with, and it is showing up as a motive behind behind much of what appears on the surface. And this particular glamour is the glamour of racism. Now, you know, basically we are, Vera, were you, I didn't click you off yet. Did you have something further to say? Or maybe not?
No.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you then. This glamour of racism, it's obvious that it is a key motivation behind so much of the white power emphasis that is going on in some of the Western democracies. It's a refusal, a deep sense of it, of a refusal to share power with people of color, with people who are coming, you know, from Africa, from the Middle East, and so forth, and represent different cultural traditions which are considered to be suspect with regard to the white man's culture. And that's why there's such a wall, really. It begins with the mind in our country. This idea, build a wall, keep the democratically leaning people of color out of it, so they don't have the power, they don't take over the power, they don't take money, resources, our means of livelihood. You know, I'm speaking as if I'm among the very rich, you know. Not all. Some are so rich they can afford to be proper in their attitude. But there are many people who are just scared of having the Western way of life taken away from them. And that's why they want to block at the border, whether it's a tangible border as in the United States, or via boat and immigration. It's considered a threat to the white man's culture. Now, you know what's really interesting? The sixth root race, eventually, and millions of years ahead, because it will last 10 million years, we're told. We're told it's going to be a golden race, that the color of humanity is going to be more homogeneous, much more homogeneous, and that it's going to take on a golden color, whatever decay means by that. And there'll be a kind of uniformity in the outer appearance of the human being. Now, right now, the law of cleavages rules the fifth ray, or the fifth ray rules that law. That divides up cultural groups, racial groups, religious groups, political groups. The fifth ray is responsible for many of those divisions, and Europe is above all, and its extensions and former colonies, the 5 of 5. Some 6 of 5 is coming in, but the 5 of 5 can be very separative, even though nobody's going to talk about it. See, it's just there, an underlying motivation. And as a result, these other heart qualities, the qualities of spontaneous humanity, qualities of real connection and unification, which may be sponsored by some of the other racial groups, are not allowed in, and a defensive, separative posture is undertaken by those who are fighting desperately to preserve the prerogatives of the white race. And, you know, if you look at our present Republican Party, and maybe many people who are on the far right, you will find that this is emphasized by these groups particularly. There are other political parties which are more inclusive. So racism is a problem, a big problem, and we've seen advanced souls born in all the races, even the physically very relatively undeveloped groups, certain Aboriginal groups, and occasionally you find a very advanced soul born there, you see, for reasons of upliftment and so forth. So let's see what that brings us. Let's see what that brings us. Now, I don't know, Zenaidi, did I leave you on there, or is it, or did you want to say something? I'm not sure, but maybe not. Maybe it was just I that did that by mistake. Anyway, you can raise your hand if you want to. And then, but for right now, I would like to plunge into this meditation because time is running out, okay? And I can't basically go for more than 2 hours, and already we're going to be more than 2 hours. So, here we go. So we just be in the silence a little bit here and gather our energy once again in the silence. And so this energizing of the group in the silence will make us more effective. Now we go through the formula of protection and we trace the light in this cross of divinity. We imagine that we are seeing lines of light as we trace this cross, and it also appears in a larger form in front of the whole group. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. Now we focus the three lights. We know what we're doing by now. We've done it a long time. Lifting etheric, physical, vital light to the mental plane, where it joins the light of the mental plane. And calling upon, locating the light of the soul, which gives us altogether a wider point of view, and bringing it down. So here is our unit, three lights as one, three lights as one light. And we say, followed by the sacred word, the light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Okay, now the formula itself. Remembering that we need all three lights as a balance, really, and to, as the Tibetan says, avoid the possible overstimulation and fanaticism which would happen if we use only soul energy. So we see this as we pronounce the formula. The searchlight is turned on individually and for the group and shines upon the astral plane. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. we reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. The beam is projected, and it goes about its business of finding the glamour, this glamour very divisive over the years, based on the concrete mind and its power to divide, and such an example of the great heresy of separateness. If reincarnation is true, we can be born in any race, and probably will have been by the time the process is concluded. And we have to know who is the real inner individual, and instead of looking only at externals, the racial form and so forth, and making a prejudicial judgment accordingly, we try to see that identicality, or at least similarity, let's call it that, of the inner human being to each other. And now we strengthen the beam with the spiritual will, drawing it down from monadic and triadal sources and jewel in the lotus sources, drawing it down so we have strength in this beam, and we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Now, the words of power. And think for a minute. We don't have very far to look. We can look over the last several hundred years, and we will see what this superficial assessment that we call racism, this instinctual, almost hatred of the other types, what it's done. So think about that for a moment, this glamour of racism, this very, very separative glamour. Think what it has brought to humanity. And this naturally ties in with fear of other cultures, religions, ways of living. But there are some people these days who are setting a wonderful example. And they're on TV. They travel all over the world. They insert themselves into the races, cultures, daily life of many who are unlike themselves, and they make beautiful bridges of love and understanding and draw out the good. Okay, now, the words of power. It's racism we're dealing with, and it is still, well, sometimes very overt, and sometimes very subtle and equally as destructive. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of racism. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour of racism from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour, this virulent, separative glamour of racism. Okay, friends, now 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose. In your own way, you see the work proceeding, and we'll see the glamour being penetrated, being weakened, and dissipated. This is a prevailing tendency, which is all part of the great heresy of separateness. It can deal with racial types, religions, cultures, nations. It's been remarked, I think, you look at a map and there are all those lines. But Einstein and others have said, well, when you go up in the airplane, you don't see those lines, do you? There are some natural boundaries. They're made of water, mountains, and so forth. And different cultures are brought forward and cultivate their own type of goodness, but there has to be appreciation of the best. Of course, the reincarnational factor exists, and that has to be proven. There are very advanced souls, there are child souls, there's a whole range. And they want different things. But there's not, in any one group, a complete homogeneity of type. And that has to be understood too. You'll notice on television there are these serials, and a team is at the heart of it. And in the team, white people, black people, Chinese people, people of all mixed color, different races, their team. And they demonstrate real cooperative teamwork, such as is coming. They're absolutely blind to the racial differences. They don't count because they see the individual, the inner human being. So let's work on that. As we withdraw our beam back to the mental plane, and the light of the soul, the light of mind, the light of matter, they exist in the three locations, and we sound the Om 3 times, recognizing that some work of value has been done. Okay, friends, we continue to work. Really, our great blow is against the great heresy of separateness, which is the root of so many glamours and illusions, and brings us chaos on the etheric plane as well. We continue to work. Thank you. Tonight, in a more academic mode, at 8 o'clock GMT, we'll attack cosmic fire again, and we're at the really at the introduction of it. We're going to be working with the 9 as it grows out of the 3. The 9, which is the cyclic number of the third ray, and the 9 sephirot and the 9 numbers short of 10. All of that is part of the foundation. Thank you for being here. The whole team sends its love to you and many blessings from Tuya, Olivia, BL, Joe, Michael, Vic, all those who are bringing you these programs for the expansion of the understanding of the ageless wisdom and its spread throughout the world. Appreciate your attendance. Little longer program here. Thanks those of you who are able to endure. We'll see you now, and all the very best.